Hello and welcome. My name is Nikhil. I'm a producer and trainer with DJP Media. And in this video, we're going to look at how to get started making music with Ableton Live. So the art of making music is called as music production, and today music is made or produced using software application inside of your computers, and these softwares are called as digital audio workstations or DAWs. So the DAW we'll be using to make our music here is called as Ableton Live. There are numerous DAWs in the market, but we'll go with this one from the point of view of this course. What is music? Music can be thought of as a composition of three types of layers: melody, harmony, and rhythm. And if you understand these layers, you can basically make any type of music that you want or build any kind of musical sections that you want. Now, to begin understanding these layers, it is important that you understand a little bit of music theory. And what is music theory? A great place to start is by going through this video by Dawn on music theory. So this lesson is right here in the important links section below. Let us listen to a musical section that I made in Ableton Live and then talk ahead. So this is Ableton Live, and what you just heard was a small piece of music that I made here. Now let us understand a bit about what is going on under the hood. So these vertical columns are called as channels or tracks. These are my independent units to manage my individual sounds. When I hit this button, this is called as the solo button, I can isolate and listen to just each of these individual sounds separately. This is the volume fader. I can lower it or increase it to control my volume. And this is called as the pan control, which allows me to shift my sound to the left or center or right or anywhere in that whole area. So now let's look at creating a brand new project and build a musical section from scratch and understand these fundamentals of music through it. So I'm going to hit Control N, or that would be Command N if I was using a Mac. Now this creates a new project, and what you're looking at is basically the default view of Ableton when you open the application for the first time. Let me explain the views of Ableton for you. So Ableton has 4 different types of views, primarily which you use to make music. So this is called as the session view, where we are going to be working for most of this session. If I hit tab, I can toggle to what is called as the arrangement view, which we'll get to a little bit later. Down here below, we have 2 different types of views. There is a clip view, and this is the device view, which we'll also talk about in due time. But now first, let's focus on the session view. So in the session view, you see 2 types of tracks. You see a MIDI track and you see an audio track. Now MIDI tracks are basically used to manage our digital instruments or our digital sounds. Audio track basically deals with recorded audio, which means if I was going to sing or if someone was going to sing, they would want to record themselves on an audio track. Now I can add more audio or MIDI tracks simply by right clicking in this general area and saying insert audio track, and Ctrl T is the shortcut. For Mac it would be Command T, and to insert a MIDI track I would do Ctrl Shift T, or in Mac it would be Command Shift T. So right now I'm simply going to delete these audio tracks because from the point of view of this lesson, I will not be using audio tracks. So what I can do is simply click on the first one, hold Control and click on the next one, and simply hit delete. So first, let's look at building the harmony section. So as you can see, I have my MIDI track. You can think of a MIDI track as a placeholder for a musician or an instrument. So now I need to find some musicians or instruments. So right here, this is the browser category. You can think of this as a supermarket that you can walk into and get instruments, effects, and a lot of other objects that you can work with within your project. So I'm going to go into the sounds category and browse through some sounds. Notice that when I click on them, it previews me what kind of sound it is. I'm going to go into my strings category. Yeah, I think I'll go with this sound. So to use the sound, all I have to do is drag and drop it onto my MIDI track. So I'm going to click, drag and drop it onto my MIDI track, and you see now the instrument or the musician is sitting on that MIDI track, right? So basically I have the instrument on the track. Now all I need to do is tell the instrument to play something. Now to do that, let me introduce a new object for you. It is called as a clip, and the way I create a clip is by going to one of these empty rectangular slots and simply hitting double click. So you see something new has appeared. Now this is called as a clip, and what you're looking at below in the clip view is called as the clip view, and this is the place where I can start building out my musical patterns. So let's focus on the clip view for a minute. Inside the clip view you can see that there is a vertical piano roll. I can simply use my scroll to scroll up and down this piano roll. It's just like any other piano with a lot of octaves and all the notes. And towards the right side, I have time. So this is a piano roll, which is basically my piano over time, where I can write my music over time. So now let's add our first note. So I can add a note into this clip view by simply double clicking in this general area. So what you're looking at is a note. I can zoom in or zoom out by coming behind the piano roll and clicking and dragging forward or backward. So I have a note here. I can adjust the size of the note by coming to this right side end, and you can see the stapler pin kind of an object, and I can simply drag it forward and backward to adjust the size of my note. Now let's play this clip. I can come here to my session view, and you can see the small play symbol next to the clip. I'm going to hit it. Now it's playing, but we don't know what exactly is happening, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on this metronome, and what the metronome does is give me a pulse according to the tempo of the song. And you can see the tempo right here. Right now it's set to 120, and you can see the pulse giving the beat. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can adjust this. I can click and drag down to make it slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can go all the way high. I can be crazy about it. But what we are going to do is I'm going to set a tempo which I'm comfortable with, or what I'm feeling at the moment. Let's go with about 84 BPM. So now let's try making a harmony. So when I say harmony, we have to be more specific. So let's start working on a chord progression. So I have one note here, but we have to decide a few things, right? We have to decide what is the scale of this song, and then we have to decide the chord progression. So Ableton has made it quite easy in that if you look over to the left side of your clip view, you see the scale function. I can simply enable it, and I can choose a scale that I want. I'm going to go with A minor. I'm going to choose A as my key, and in the second drop down I'm going to select minor. So automatically what happens is Ableton is going to highlight the notes of my scale within the clip view. So now we have the scale sorted, and I don't have to go and remember what is my scale, what are the notes of my scale, or I have to look at some notes because Ableton is already highlighting it here. Makes it quite easy. So now the next thing is I need to work out my chord progression. So let us go with 1, 5, 3 and 4. Alright? So now what is 1, 5, 3, 4? So to work this out, an easy way is to place your roots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this note, and in A minor, 1 would be A for root. I can simply use my arrow keys to navigate the note wherever within my clip view. So I'm going to get it to A3, and now let us fix the root note of my second chord. So for 5, what I would be doing is I'll simply hit Ctrl D or Command D in Mac, which would be to duplicate my selected note. So now I can use my arrow keys to come to the 5th note position. I don't remember what that is, but I'm going to go by these highlighted keys. So I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, just about right. And 1, 5, I'm going to duplicate this one again and come to 3. And I'm going to duplicate it again, come to 4. So there, I have my relative roots of my chord progression. So now we need to work out our thirds and our fifths. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to select my first note, I'm going to hit Control C and Control V, which is basically copying and pasting the same thing on top of it. And I'm going to use my arrow key to simply move that copy up. So I'm going to get it to the third position. And now I'm going to do the same thing, Control C and Control V. By the way, for Mac, it would be Command C and Command V. And I'm going to use my arrow keys to come to the fifth. And I'm going to do the same thing. Another way to do this is hold Control or Command. I think that would be Option for Mac, not Command, sorry. And you can simply drag it to the third. And again, hold and drag it to the fifth. So this is another way of copying things. So we can simplify this process much more from now on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire chord and I'm going to hit Control D and just put it in its place. Let me manage the third, and now I'm going to duplicate this again and simply move it. So what's happening is the new note is sort of overwriting the previous note which already existed there. So now let's simply play this clip again. So I feel this is a little high. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift all of the notes of this chord by 1 octave lower. So I'm going to hit Control A, which basically selects all the notes within the clip, or Command A for Mac. And I'm going to do Shift Down arrow. Shift down arrow and shift up arrow basically allows you to move your selected notes up by 1 octave or down by 1 octave. Okay. Okay, so now we have a chord progression playing in the lower octave and it sounds much better for this instrument. So this is something that you'll have to do. Whenever you put an instrument and you place your notes, it's possible that it may not work out the way you think it should work within that octave. So just before you decide to switch your instrument, just try moving it around to a higher or lower octave. It's a good idea. Now that we have worked out our harmony section, next thing we need to build out our drum section. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about what's happening within this clip. So this clip is essentially 1 bar long. And you'll know that when you hear the 4 metronome clicks, which stands for 4 beats. So 4 beats make a bar. And over here, I can look at those settings. So if you see, the length says 1.0.0. So 1 is essentially the bar count. This is the beat count. And this is the count of the 16ths. Let's build out the drum section now. Over here, I have the second track. It's an empty MIDI track. So let's follow the same routine. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to come over here to my categories, but instead of going to the sounds category, let's go to the drums category. And within the drums, I can scan through different drum kits. And just like before, when I click on a kit, you get a preview of what it sounds like. So I'm going to go with this 808 core kit, drag it and drop it onto my empty MIDI track. So now I have the drum kit. If you notice, the drum kit is now loaded on the device view. And in the device view, the instrument that you're looking at, this is called as a drum rack. And here, I'm able to listen to the different sounds that this drum rack holds. Now, another interesting thing you'll notice is, when I create a clip by double clicking, I see the piano roll, but instead of looking at notes like how we used to for the harmony section, I actually look at those individual samples of drum hits that we see in the drum rack. So to build out a drum section, we are going to look at building a very basic drum pattern for today, and it's called as a 4 on the floor drum pattern. So what I'm going to do is put 4 notes, one on at the beginning of each beat for my bass drum. Let's have that playing back. And let me just switch off my metronome. If I solo this, you're going to hear that. And now let me keep it soloed so that we can focus more on the drums. Along with this, for the 4 on the floor pattern, we need to work out a snare drum on every alternate beat. So this is something that you would have heard across millions of different songs of millions of different style. So this is the basic 4 on the floor beat. It's a very good place to start building out your beats. So now let's look at how we can change this up and make it a little bit more unique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add closed hi-hats, and I'm going to add these hi-hats on every 16th. Basically, I'm selecting one and just hitting Ctrl D so that it automatically copies itself over to all of these grids. So now when I play this back, alright, that sounds nice. But to make this even more interesting, what I can do is I can start moving around my kick drums. So that way I get close to working out a unique groove. And you can even add some extra bass drum beats if you'd like. Last thing I'm going to do is move some of these closed hat positions to open hats. So what I'm going to do is just select them at random and shift them over to the open hat position, which is there over here. What you're going to notice here is the open hat wants to play, but the moment you bring in a closed hat soon after the open hat, it is going to choke the open hat sound. Let me demonstrate that for you quickly. So you hear how that open hat sound is like spilling over, and now it's not able to spill over. So this is a great way to work out some interesting beats by creating this open hat, closed hat play around. So I'm going to remove this last closed hat. Instead of deleting something in Ableton, you can also deactivate things. So what I'm going to do is this last closed hat, I'm simply going to hit 0, which is the shortcut to deactivate things. And now you're not going to hear it, but it's still there in the future if you'd want to enable it again. Now we have a drum beat. This is our primary rhythmic section. So let's listen to this along with the harmony section. Alright, that sounds decent. Before I move on, I'd like to point to one thing, that it's a good idea to rename your tracks. So I'm going to right click on this at where the title bar is and hit rename. And I'm going to call this harmony, and same thing with this, I'm going to rename this. You can also use the shortcut Ctrl R or Command R for Mac. So we have our drums, we have our harmony. The next thing what we'll work out is the melody section. So for that, I don't have tracks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in this general area and say insert MIDI track. Or I could have as well hit the shortcut. So now let's come to the sounds. Let's choose a sound which you would think would go well for the melody. So I'm going to come over to my synth lead section. Okay, I'm going to go with that sound. I'll click it and drag it all the way to the third MIDI track. And so the sound is loaded, the instrument is loaded on the device view. I need to make a clip to start making some music on this. So I'm going to double click, have my clip. So here it's just like how it was in the harmony, we can look at all the notes across the piano roll. So now to work out melody, there's a very interesting approach that we'd like to walk you through. The way we are going to do this is work out the most basic melodies of all. And what's the most basic melody of all? It's Sarigama Padanisa. You're just going to put out your scale in an ascending order. So I'm going to do exactly that. My scale is A minor, and I'm simply going to write out my A minor notes in ascending order. So I'll put A, I'm going to duplicate that, move it to B, and do the same thing. So you see, you get used to working things out faster the more and more you get used to shortcuts. So let me just play that back. Okay, the volume is a little too loud. I'm going to move it lower. Also, I want to see how this sounds like in the higher octave. So I'm going to select all the notes with Ctrl A or Command A and shift it higher. Yeah, I think that sounds much better. So I'm going to duplicate these notes. So what I'm going to do is do Ctrl A and hit Ctrl D to duplicate all of these notes. So now the next part of this approach is I have my scale, Sarigama Padanesa. Now I'll start shuffling around these notes. I'll start moving them around to sort of arrive at an interesting pattern that I could work with. So this is a great approach. Even if it's possible that some of us might have ideas in our heads and we might want to put it directly, but that creative inspiration might not be there all the time. So this is a great way to like sort of bypass that. So the way I swap my notes is I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to hold down on Shift and select another note. Okay, that's the same one. Alright, so let's do this. And I'm going to hit reverse within this clip properties section. So you can see how those two notes swap positions in time. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that. That sounds pretty interesting. Now what more can I do to this? A simple approach to make this even more spicier is by deactivating some of my notes and creating pauses. So I'm going to go ahead and select this note and hit 0. And also you can look at extending the length of some of the notes to keep it a little more dynamic rather than having a note happening on every 16th all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a note and just extend it over. And what it basically does is delete the note which is happening next to it. So I'm going to extend this as well and deactivate this. Alright, so let's go with that. So now I have my melody section worked out. I'm just going to rename that very quickly. Melody. So there we have it. We have a harmony section, we have a drum section, and we have a melody section worked out. Let's now work out the bass section. So you can think of bass as sort of like a melody, but you know our hearing range, right? Our hearing range can go from really low to really high. So we have the melody section and the harmony section, but not always do they cover the really low pitch ranges. And so for that, you need to keep the listener engaged. You need something going on in that area. So for that reason, we have the bass. So let's work out the bass section. So what I'm going to do is right click over here, insert a new MIDI track. I'm going to come into my sounds, and if you notice, if you scroll up, there is a section dedicated for bass. So in that, we have a lot of different bass presets. So I'm going to go with this. I'm going to drag this and drop it onto the 4th MIDI channel. So there, I have my bass instrument. Let me quickly rename that with a shortcut. So like I said, bass works as a melody. There are many different ways of doing this, and there's a lot more depth when it comes to bass, but we'll work out something simple for today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my melody and put it onto the bass track. And let us solo that and have a listen. Okay, it doesn't really sound like bass. So immediately the first thing that comes to mind is lower pitches. So what I'm going to do is select all of my notes inside the clip and do shift down arrow. Okay, not low enough. Maybe, but let's go one more step. Yeah, I think that sounds like bass. That sounds pretty thick, pretty low. Let's go with that. Another thing that comes to mind when you think about bass is It's not usually as fast and playful as melody. It does not want to compete with the melody. It sort of wants to stay in the background and sort of support that low pitch area. So what I'm going to do is deactivate a bunch of these notes by hitting 0 and making some of the notes longer, right? Let's deactivate this as well. And also let's give some pauses in the bass, just to keep things interesting. So let's listen to that. And now let's listen to it along with the rest of our track. Well, that sounds good enough. So now I have my musical section. I have melody, harmony, rhythm. I have my drums. I have my bass. All of this is creating music. But is this enough? Can I call this a song and put it up on Spotify tomorrow or today? I don't think I can, because this is just one section, right? No one would want to go on Spotify and listen to music which just sounds like elevator music. It just doesn't change. It's like you're stuck in a lift. What we need is changes. So this is one section. I need to work out more similar sections and sort of structure them or organize them in a meaningful way. So let's get started on that. One thing I'd like to point out now is all of my individual tracks, they're like tiny little rivers, right? They come and accumulate at this master track. This is the volume control for the master track. In the master track, you can see there's a play button. And what is that going to do? It is going to play my entire row at once. And I can stop all of them with the stop button. So this row is also called as a scene. Now, my musical section, I can also refer to it as a scene in Ableton Live. So let's play the first scene. Now, similar to this, let's look at building multiple scenes around this scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and drag it all the way to the bottom. And so I have my main scene at the bottom. I'm going to rename this over here. I'm going to call it my main scene. I could also call it my main section in general terms. Okay. Every song needs an intro. So let's start by working on an intro. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to choose one of these sections to sort of drive my intro. So let's just listen to the harmony. I think that sounds good enough. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to copy just my harmony clip by right clicking and hitting copy and paste it on the first row under harmony. I can also do this by clicking it, holding down on Control or Option for Mac and dropping it here. So I'm going to rename the first row or the first scene as my intro section. So I have my intro, go into my main section. So now let's look at building this up. The energy, it just doesn't match. The intro is here and the main section is like right over there. So we need some more sections to sort of work out different energy levels of my music, right? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to copy this harmony intro, paste it below to the second row, and let me also add this bass. I'm going to copy my bass and paste it to the second row. So let's listen to it from the intro. So when we listen to this sounds a little more fluent, right? I'm going from the intro to this sort of like a second intro and then leading up to my main section. So I'm going to call this as intro 2. Now I have my main section, but just having that is usually not enough. If you listen to a lot of music, you have multiple sections, right? You have things like verses, choruses, bridge, build up, drop. You have a lot of different things. So the least we can do to do justice to this music is have another alternate section to keep it a little more dynamic and interesting. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to copy everything that is there in my main scene to create a new scene. I can easily do this by directly moving my scene, but by holding down on Control or Option. And I'm going to place it just below the second intro. Let me rename that as intro 2. And I'm going to rename this main section as an alternate section. Let us now look at changing up this alternate section to be a little different than the main section. So we can easily do that by going into our individual tracks or our individual clips and start working on them. So what I'm going to do with my harmony is, I'm going to hit on this into 2 button, which basically is making it half speed. So if you notice, the length of my clip has now changed to 2 bars instead of 1 bar, and each of my chords is 2 beats long. Alright, let's go with that. We can also do something more to change this up. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to select any 2 chords, the first chord, and hold down Shift, and let me select the third chord. And I'm going to hit reverse to swap position, sort of like changing this chord progression for this alternate section, just to keep it interesting. Alright, so now let's change up the drums as well. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to play this drums clip and do the same thing. I'm going to hit into 2. So you can hear that the entire drum pattern has sort of slowed down, giving you a different vibe altogether. Still related to the original vibe. And I think that's good enough. Let me just isolate and listen just the harmony and the drums. I can hit Control and also click on the solo button and add multiple things in solo, and it would be Command for Mac. And if I play the main section, so you can feel a massive difference right over there just by doing changes to these 2 parts. So let's see what else can we do to the melody and bass. So right off, I know that I've slowed down my harmony. It would be a good idea to slow down my bass as well to sort of match the groove that the drums and the harmony is doing. So I'm going to select my bass and slow it down. Now let us take this another step ahead and start tweaking our melody as well. So I'm going to do something very simple to melody. Let me just play that. I'm going to select some of these notes and move them to the lower octave. And now let's listen to the alternative section and then go into the main section. So you can listen to how the energy ramps up when I go from the alternative section to the main section, even though both of them are really wholesome. So I might as well say that the main section is a little more catchier and more memorable. So I'm going to call this as a hook. So there we have it. Let's just play from the intro all the way down to the hook. You might also notice that when I was switching things, I wasn't really clicking on time. I wasn't really that focused that I was hitting the click on the next scene button exactly when the 4 count ended. So Ableton automatically takes care of that by using something called as a global quantization. So if you can see this menu, if I switch it to none and try again, you can see how abrupt it is. So basically, by default, Ableton gives a 1 bar of buffer zone. So even if I'm clicking a little bit too early, Ableton is going to wait for its waiting period of 1 bar and then switch. That way we don't hear any abrupt switching behavior. It's all very smooth and very nice. Also, as you can see in this menu, you have a lot more different waiting times and you can change all this up as per your convenience. Now that we have built out our musical sections, it's a good time to start thinking about arranging them. Deciding what kind of order should each of the sections play back and how much time should each of the sections repeat. And there's a lot of things that go into this process and a lot of creative ways to actually put together an arrangement. So we are going to talk about all of this in the next lesson. Also, is this the only way of making music? Of course not. This is just meant as a guideline, as a reference for you to get used to start making music as well as get used to how Ableton Live works. And once you practice these techniques, you will be able to further expand it and make it your own. Try different sounds, different instruments, different tempos, different scales, and try making the music or the styles of music that actually inspires you. If you like the way I teach, do check out my live online masterclass on music production on our platform. And speaking of the platform, do engage with the platform because there's a community of producers, artists, trainers, who are having interesting discussions. Go join that discussion. If you have a question, post it there. If you'd like to share your music, we'd be more than happy to listen it and give you feedback on that. Thank you for watching. Happy learning and be creativity.